Time for another Dirt Daily, and I am slowly putting this Jeep back together. I think I'm ready to put the grill on. I have the hoses all laid out for the radiator, the upper and lower radiator hoses. There's also a vent hose, like a steam port hose. I have the air conditioning lines here, and the nuts for those are still on the grill, which is laying right over there on the floor. I have the transmission cooling lines that are going down to the brand new transmission. I flushed out the transmission. I used a bunch of brake clean and a bunch of compressed air, flushed it out multiple times. So the transmission cooler should be clean, which is good because the old transmission had like I want to say this thing has 120,000. I don't actually know because I've never had it turned on to see the odometer. But hopefully there's nothing in the cooler to contaminate the new transmission. I have all the clips for that, all of the hardware. When Joe came over to help, we put all the hardware in a little bag. So that's good. And there is some wires for like the electric fan. This plug, I think, goes to the module that tells you if the hood's open. There's also the headlight plugs. I had mentioned when I pulled that out that you have to remove the grill to change the headlights. That's kind of true. If you're changing the entire housing, you can actually get access to the back of the housing to change just the bulb without pulling the grill off. So I was a little bit misinformation there, but the cool thing is I have all the grill. I think I have everything ready, and my neighbor has a brand new JL, and so he let me borrow it. It's parked out in front of my shop, so I can keep walking back and forth out to there to double check that everything's hooked up right. So let's do this. Here is the grill, and there are pins at either end that go into some slots in the front frame body section. So this can just kind of lift up, and we'll kind of do one at a time. That side, and then this side. If it doesn't go, don't jam it on there. There's probably something in the way. Grab your step stool so you can see down in there. It's probably a radiator hose because they are going to take a lot of, they're going to kind of get in the way. Both the upper and the lower radiator hose. Yep, the bottom one's kind of messing up the program down there. You kind of want to lay everything out, and then before you just start hooking stuff up. What's holding this guy up? There's definitely something in the way. So we kind of reach down in here, grab your flashlight, search and see what is holding up the program. I seem to have the passenger side lined up. What's in the way on this side? Okay. It looks like it might need to kind of shift over. So we'll pick it up. Whoop, now that side's in. Now this side's in. Oh, bam. Success. So now it's in. I'm going to go through and start hooking everything up. Front core support is back in. I hooked up the headlights. I hooked up the radiator. I hooked up the AC lines. I hooked up the transmission cooling lines. I put in the air intake from the throttle body that starts heading over towards the air box. I hooked up a bunch of other lines, plugs, wires, everything that I could find that we had taken apart when we pulled the core support and the grill out. I think I have back together. For the most part, I found everything I needed. The two screws that hold this kind of elbow on, I found in a box of screws that the prior owner had thrown together. I don't know if those are the right ones for that, but they look like the same as what was on my neighbor's Jeep, which I've been kind of using as reference. I really wish that there was just a set of instructions. I don't know that there's like a Chilton or Haynes manual yet for this new of a vehicle, and I also don't know that I haven't been able to find like a Mopar service manual, but I'm sure something's out there. But for the most part, as long as I keep going back and forth between what I have and what my neighbor has, I can kind of work it out. The next step is going to be a little bit more tricky though. Back in this corner of the Jeep, there is a giant plastic box. It looks like this. And what this does is this mounts in there and it holds an auxiliary battery down in here. Then it holds a bunch of plugs, a fuse box, and then the main battery sits right here. And all of this plugs right in there. And unfortunately, on my neighbor's Jeep, I almost have to disassemble his Jeep in order to figure out where everything goes. I'm not really ready to do that. So what I'm probably going to do is try and scope out on his where stuff goes without disassembling it. I don't want to take another Jeep apart to try and put this one back together. However, I have found most of the panels, and there was a pile of hardware in here too. Whether or not it's the right stuff is kind of hard to know. This is all the stuff that the prior owner took apart and kind of just threw in the back of the Jeep. So I've been kind of hoping that everything is still in here or with it. And the other tricky part is the routing of the wiring. From the factory, they figured out the most efficient route to run all those wires, I'm sure. Or if not the most efficient, like they just cut everything to fit in a certain way. Now I have to kind of backtrack and try and figure out, well, where does this go? Where does that go? And there are it's not like an old Jeep where there's a positive battery and a negative battery terminal. You bolt those in and you bolt the battery down and it's done. This thing has all types, probably 25 or 50 different wires running around in this corner and big giant plugs that all have to plug into the fuse box in a certain spot. So this will be the next part. I'm going to kind of test fit a bunch of different stuff and see if this will go in there, and hopefully I can get it to bolt in there and hold the battery in. Yesterday I was getting really frustrated with this electrical box corner battery situation on NewbSock, but it's coming together today. Last night I finally figured out where there's like this big plastic box. Basically I had a pile of parts and I wasn't sure where everything went. And I found that this big plastic box bolts into the side of the fender and back on the firewall. And once I kind of got that in place and made sure everything underneath was kind of buttoned up as best as it could be, then it started coming together. There's these 4 big plugs. There's a gray one, a black one, a white one, and a blue one. And they all plug into the bottom of this piece, which is the fuse box. And then underneath that, there's a panel, and that panel sits above this thing, which you might think is ridiculous. There's a little baby battery that lives down inside here. But this has something to do with that stop-start situation where the Jeep will shut off at stoplights and help conserve fuel. A lot of people hate that. I don't really care that much. I just kind of want to get it back up and running. And so I was told I don't even need to put this back in, but for now I'm going to just put it back in and see if I can keep it, getting it back to stock before we start modifying it. So this thing lives down inside here. I'm going to tighten that up and start putting this panel on and then keep moving ahead. Here you can see this big plastic box. Here are the boxes that plug into the bottom of the fuse panel. There's the gray, white, blue, and black. And then down underneath all of that, that's where that little baby battery sits. It seems like the terminals go towards the firewall, and then the wires come down in and tighten that up, and then that's actually going to be buried underneath a bunch of other panels. The next step is this. This is the fuse panel, and on this end of the fuse panel there's a whole bunch of terminals, and I was looking at this and I was going, how in the world do I figure out what goes to all of those? You can see here's a wire, and here's 2 more wires, and there's already 3 on there. But if you look really close at the end of this, there's a number right there at the top. It's upside down. It's a 7. This one has a 6 on it and a 5 on that one. And also notice how the ends of the terminals have like little tabs, and they're all different. Well, up here on the terminals, there are matching numbers, and there are slots in the plastic box that match all of those tabs on the end. So this end, you can see the 1, 2, and 3 all tab right in, and they all have matching numbers. Number 4 does not have a wire that goes to it. I noticed that when I looked at my neighbor's Jeep. And then the 5, 6, and 7 will all line up. So here's the number 5. You can see it there, it's upside down. This terminal is number 5. And when you slide this over, that tab on the end there lines up with the plastic cutout on the box. And then we just tighten down this. And then we do the same with number 6, which has 2 slots, and number 7. Now that the fuse box is all plugged in, I have to figure out which plug goes to each one of these. Here's our big 4 plugs: black, white, blue, and gray. But that's not as bad as I thought it was once you figure out how the system goes together. Figuring out where these plugs go isn't terrible if you have this piece of the puzzle. So this plastic box goes underneath these plugs and screws in to these 2 studs that are right here on top of the lid that goes over the baby battery. And then, here's the best part. Each of these plugs have certain notches that line up with certain slots in this box. So there's 2 big and 2 little. This one has the same matching plugs, and that all pops right in there. Now you don't want to put it in just yet, because we still need to put those nuts on that hold this down. And you need to get this all tucked away in here nice. So that drops in and lines up over those studs. And then there's 3 fasteners. There's 2 nuts and 1 little baby screw that goes down in there to hold that down. And then you can put all those plugs in. All right, the box is plugged in. Now we put each plug into its little home. That one clips in there. The white one goes here. The blue one goes here. And this gray one runs all the way down to that end. Next, all you have to do is there are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws in the top of the fuse box, fuse panel, and they actually thread right into each plug underneath. So you just have to nice and gently get everything lined up. There's a kind of a round corner on each corner, and those have to go into these round corners and help line everything up. And you definitely don't want to force any of this. There we go. These are all starting. I think it's a 7 mil. There it goes. Everything's clipping into space. Make sure you get everything tight. When it comes to this electrical stuff, I was using the impact to hold the box, to screw the box, start over, Fred. When it comes to this electrical stuff, it's okay using an impact to kind of screw down the plastic stuff, but even then I'm just tapping it. This stuff I'm going to just do it by hand. Keep it all gentle to pull all those tabs in line and put this thing all together. This is pretty crazy when you think back to like original Jeeps and the old Jeeps that I work on a lot of times. They don't have nearly this much electrical superhighway going on here. Information superhighway. But everything's looking good. One more step closer to getting this thing running. Final step for the fuse box. This is the cover. You want to keep this because it lists where every fuse is and what it all goes to. And it also protects all of those terminals back there. This is our main power, and this is our main ground. So I think we're just about ready to hook those up and put the big battery in here. Ugh. I have a brand new Odyssey battery here that I'm gonna try and stuff in here. I am missing the battery tie down clip that holds it in place, but I will have to see if it's in any of the boxes of stuff that came with the Jeep, or if I can pick one up at the local auto parts store or dealership. Oh geez, you can't, I'm cutting my head off. Doing really bad. There we go. Wasn't paying attention. I can tighten up the battery terminals and get this thing installed. Look at that. It's like coming together. I was petrified at all of these wires 24 hours ago, and now everything is falling into place. This battery sits inside, like tucks underneath a little clip in there that holds it from flopping out, and then there's a clip on this side. So I have grounds hooked up. We're getting really close to starting this thing. So the next episode, we're gonna see if we can make this thing run. That's it for this Dirt Daily. We'll see you next time.